Hello, you are listening to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we celebrate films we think deserve a little bit more love, whether they're underrated or underseen. We're going to tackle them one film at a time. It's just me this week as we're going to be tackling another listener's suggestion. Whilst I've got your attention, if you could be a lovely person and head on over to wherever you're listening to this, if the option is there, give us a little rating and review. It helps other people find us and other people suggest films. If you do want to suggest a film for us, then drop us an email. It's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. Tell us your suggestion, a little bit about yourself, and you can even do it with a voice note if you want. This week, Simon got in touch to suggest we take a look at The Lookout from 2007. So if you haven't seen it, The Lookout is about Joseph Gordon-Levitt, plays a guy called Chris Pratt, not that one, a young man with a bright future, which is quickly halted when he sustains a head injury, leaving him with symptoms such as memory loss and other impairments which limit his life. He lives with his blind friend Lewis, who's played by Jeff Daniels. He attends classes to help his recovery, and then he works at night as a janitor in a bank. He grows frustrated with his lack of prospects and is eventually tempted into an act of crime by the elusive and mercurial Gary, who is an old school friend of his, played by Matthew Good. So here is what Simon, our wonderful listener Simon, had to say. Hi, Simon here from Bonnie, Scotland. I suggested The Lookout as I don't know anyone who has seen or heard of this from 2007. Without giving much away, it's a heist movie, but the circumstances around it are unique. Familiar cast with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Matthew Good, most recently known for Department Q on Netflix, and Jeff Daniels as the comic relief / voice of reason. I'd be interested to know what you guys think. I find it to be pretty clever and a pretty satisfying film. I double-checked with Simon if he thought it was underrated or underseen, and he says that he reckons it's both. So we'll have a little look at that. Just to remind you of the structure, we start with the pros, what we liked, we move on to anything we didn't like, and then we'll have a little look at the critical reception and box office to decide whether or not it is indeed underrated or underseen, or both, as Simon has suggested. So first of all, thank you very much, Simon, for getting in touch and suggesting that. Second of all, spoiler warnings if I haven't already done them. Right, going in then. So I hadn't heard of this, I don't think. So I went in with pretty like little to no expectations really beyond the title and the poster, which obviously you can see when you search for it. But to be honest, they're pretty generic. I mean, you can get a general idea, but it's one of those films we touched on it before, where there are plenty of films where the title, certain genres, it's like it could be anything. So it's pretty generic. Lots to like though. Really, really enjoyed this one. It's razor sharp. The script it's really well written. So it's I think it's the directorial debut of Scott Frank, but it's directed by Scott Frank, who before this had written quite a lot. I mean, his CV speaks for itself. Get Shorty, Out of Sight, Minority Report, as well as later on he did The Wolverine and Logan. So quite a lot of variety in there. I mean, the guy has serious writing range. Some really good devices in this. So as we touched on, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, Chris Pratt, not that one, has a memory condition based on the fact that he had a head injury. And they use loads of really good devices to capture his condition in terms of his coping mechanisms, his motor function issues. And then it shows the progression of his issues, how he learns to cope. Things like he tells a story to remember his day and his routine and things like that. Found that really interesting, and I know that's rooted in realism. I've got a close family member who works with people in stroke recovery, and I talked to them about it, and they sort of were like, "Oh yeah, that sounds about right." Obviously, I'm sure there's some dramatic license in there, but the fact is there's some really interesting devices in there. Some great emotionality in there as well. There is a character who is killed towards the end of the film, and the film builds the character up to be really likable and really comic. And a big part of his arc is that he's excited to be a new dad. So they make you watch him die essentially, but by making you do so, they don't linger on it. They don't sort of pornographize it or anything like that. They don't even overly dramatize of it. They literally just bang, it happens, and it really hits home the harsh reality of the situation. I thought that was far more effective than many other films where I've seen them linger on a character's death too much. So they really don't over egg the pudding. Again, show don't tell. It's short, sharp, it's got a punch. I think what I like about it is, and this is sort of what Simon I think was touching on in his note, which is it is a heist movie, but with a bit of a twist. And the twist, I think, for me in this was that it is about his mental condition. It's not about a bank robbery. A bank robbery is part of it, but it's not bottled in the bank robbery. The bank robbery is not as actually as much of it as I was expecting. It's only a short part of it. A lot of it is about Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, Chris Pratt, and all that one, recovering from his injuries and basically finding a little bit of a purpose in his life and things like that. So I really like that. It's well directed too. I think a good sign of a director is he gets good performances from his actors. So there's a little bit, there's loads of really great bits from Joseph Gordon-Levitt in this, Jeff Daniels as well, Matthew Good. And that's a great sign of a great director. Now, I've touched on the acting there, which this leads me right in. Let's get stuck into the acting. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is great in this. He gives a really quite a mature performance. I mean, again, not to be condescending him, he's in his 40s now, so I'm sure he won't care or listen to this. But he is still, he's really young in this, and I think he's excellent. He gives a real vulnerability, but likability to Chris Pratt, not that one, as a character. And you can see that sort of pain. The film is all about how he was this young man with prospects, and it was all sort of taken from him, or he lost it. And you can see that lost future and that pain written all over him, and how it affects his friends, his family, and his perception, things like that. Jeff Daniels is great in this as well as Lewis. Neither of them, obviously, both of them are playing characters with disabilities, and neither of them are doing that sort of cliche give me awards disability acting. And I think this was made at a time when that was quite common to do so. So I think it's worth noting that they went for realism and sort of almost pragmatism in their portrayals, and I thought that was really great. Supporting cast as well beyond those two are good as well. In particular, chap in this called Greg Dunham, who plays a character called Bone. Never seen him in anything before, to the point where I don't even think he has a hyperlink on Wikipedia, but he gives a great, almost line-free line in dialogue. He gives a great line in dialogue-free menace, is what I'm trying to say there. Dislikes-wise, look, there's not a lot from me on this. A couple of plot holes and a couple of exposition gaps. I think we need to know maybe a little bit more about Chris at the start and his ambitions in order to feel like there's a lost future. As an aside to that, there's a sort of a plot about Chris and Lewis, who, as I say, are flatmates or roommates in this. There's this little sort of plot about how they want a restaurant, and that felt to me like it sort of came from nowhere. So I think I need to know a little bit more about that in order for the ending and them achieving that to pay off towards the end. Other than that, look, trying to be objective about it, trying to be balanced. I think some people in this day and age, and this is down to personal taste or whatever you want to call it, subjectivity, I think they may have an issue with the casting of non-disabled actors in disabled roles. I personally don't. I think as long as it's handled well and tastefully, which this is. Other than that, the only issue I have is that Jeff Daniels' character is really rude to some waiting on staff, and I don't care what happened to you in a film, that can get in the bin. Don't ever be rude to service industry staff. Critical reception then. So just to remind you of the structure. So first of all, Simon picked it because he thinks it's underseen and underrated. So we're going to look at both. So just look at the structure of the critical reception. Then we do the IMDb, the Rotten Tomatoes audience, the Rotten Tomatoes critic, and then we average it out. So at the time of recording, it gets 6.9 out of 10 on IMDb. 74% from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes, 87% from the critics, which is pretty high, which averages out to 76% or 7.6. In terms of ratings, I think that's pretty appropriately rated, 7.6. I think the IMDb is a little low and the critics score is a little high. So I think it balances out pretty well. Box office wise, though, according to Box Office Mojo, it only did 5.3 million worldwide. So I think it's definitely underseen. It's sort of like a low-key, lower level Memento meets Heat. Whilst it's not as good as Heat or anything like that, or maybe not even as good as Memento, there's plenty to like if you're a fan of those films, or if you're looking for a sort of sharp and engaging crime thriller with some good performances and some interesting plot devices. So I'd say it's appropriately rated, but it's definitely underseen, definitely worth a watch. So thank you for suggesting that one. Simon will be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on all the social medias. If you search Just Films and That on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok and YouTube, you can find us. We're always putting stuff out there. And if you go into the show notes, there's our Letterboxd. You can give us a follow on there. And there's our coffee page there if you'd like to support the podcast in any way. Anything you do, ratings, reviews, coffee, all of that, it's massively appreciated. So thank you. But you know what? Thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next time. It's goodbye from me. Cheerio.